welcome. Today we are going to be talking about RStudio and Quarto and how to get started with writing projects in Quarto. So Quarto is the project package in R, for lack of a better word, that is going to be what we're working with throughout the course and how you're going to learn to write scientific documents. So, quick little background, Quarto is for writing scientific and other kind of technical documents. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and it works off of the Markdown language, which we'll talk a little bit about. For anyone who has used R Markdown in the past, it is very, very similar to R Markdown, almost exactly the same types of, structure that you'll be using, how you'll be writing, the Markdown language. Just a few little differences here and there that you'll get used to, but let's dive into it. So I'm going to talk about writing with Quarto. I'm going to talk about using our projects today, and we're going to talk specifically about why we'd want to use our projects, things like the file paths and having an R environment and what that means for our reproducible research. And then we're going to practice a little bit with rendering. So let's get started with we'll just start by opening a Quarto document. So I'm going to pull this here, and I'm going to open this blank R instance that I have right here. So I just opened this right off my desktop, and nothing really going on here. Actually, this is in my just documents folder. So what I want to do is start to open a Quarto document. So what I'm going to do in RStudio, so I've got my RStudio up, I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go to New File, and then Quarto Document. Okay, so I have some options here, and all of these options, these are like the default for Quarto, and I don't necessarily need to change any of the defaults, so I'm just going to put for the title class 2 demo. And then the options are HTML, PDF, or Word in terms of like what document you might want to knit to or where we want to get to. So we're going to be writing this in R, but then eventually what do we want that document to turn into? And you can set this here, but honestly it does not matter. You can change this at any time within the R document, so don't worry too much about this. I'm going to keep it as HTML. We are going to use the Knitter engine. We will always be using Knitter. If you are using Python more, you might think about using Jupyter, but we'll be using Knitter for here. And then use the visual Markdown editor. So this actually, some people, I tend to prefer the source code just because that's how I learned it. But for folks that are just starting out, you might actually prefer the visual editor for some of your work, and I'll show you what that is in a second. So I'm going to create this document. Notice how it says document, presentation, or interactive. We're going to stick with documents here and always just do documents. And I will go ahead and create. You can have two options. You can create an empty document or just create one that is already has all this information in what's going to be called your YAML header. So I'm going to create it with all this information there. All right, and it's taking just a moment here, but we can see that pretty quickly we have this this document. Now, this information that I set up in the previous box is here. So I said it was class 2 demo. That's going to be my title. The format is HTML, and currently this editor is visual. Again, I prefer the source code, but you can do visual as well. And then all of this stuff is just some examples for you if you were, wondering where to start, it gives you some basic examples. So we are actually just going to delete all this and we will talk about how to make it happen. So you notice here that it says heading 2, and that's because that was the last thing that we deleted, was a second level heading. So it was at that at kind of that level of font face and bolding, that it was a second level heading. If I wanted to change this, I could put it to a header 1, or we could put it to a normal, and there it goes. So I'm going to start off my document with the first header, so I'm going to leave it at header 1. And then you notice up here you kind of have very similar things to what you might be able to use, for instance, in a Word document. So you can do bullet points, you can do numbered lists, you can add links, figures and images, and you have all this. So it in a lot of ways, if you're using the visual editor, there are ways in which it's almost feels like a word processor at this point, which can make your life a lot easier. If you move over to source code, you can also run it in source code, which is essentially you're formatting it straight in R plus using the markdown language. So I will leave it up to you. You have this source mode, you have visual mode. You can learn which one works for you. I will say occasionally, if you're switching back and forth, I do have occasional problems when I'm working with a table, for instance. If I'm doing a lot of switching, sometimes it will not like switching back and forth from source mode to visual mode when you are working with something like a table. And so I would say, if you like one or the other, try to mostly stick with that one, just because you don't want to have your code mess up on you as you're switching back and forth a lot. So I would have one that is kind of maybe your home base. So we're going to start off in source mode, and we'll go back to visual again. But in source editor, and again, you can switch here from source to visual. Visual can also be good for just kind of seeing what are things looking like right now. I'm going to go ahead and take this off again, and we're going to write something. So the first thing I'm going to say is maybe I want a header. So the markdown language, which you can read the cheat sheet about. The way to set up a header is with one hash mark. So or the pound sign. So I'm going to just call this class 2 demo. And then the class 2 Quarto demonstration. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to integrate some R code in here. So the way that I integrate R code is, you can do this 2 ways in the source editor. You can do backtick, 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 so 3 backticks plus a curly braces R, and then enter your R code, and when you're done, 3 more backticks, and that'll get you out of it. Or you can, there's a point and click option for this. You can hit this insert new code chunk, and that'll just put you right there. So either way you want to do it, whatever works. And then in visual editor, I believe it is pretty much the same thing that you would be doing. You also have this insert option, and you can insert a code chunk in R like that. So that is what you could do in visual mode. So I think I'm going to see if I can give you an example of how visual mode sometimes messes up. Let me see if I do this. Oh, no, it did that. Okay, so so that's playing pretty well. So let's say that in this R chunk, I want to pull in some data. And let's see, I have some data in this, I have some data in this file it looks like that I'm currently in. So let me see if this will work. All right, so yes, so it brought in this this data file that I was looking for. And it brought it in because this is my working directory over here on the bottom right that you can see. And that is it's in my working directory. So how do I know what is my working directory? How do I know where things are? That brings us to this idea of projects and why we would use our projects. So if I saved this file, and you can see this is just in my little scraps here. If I save this file here, and then maybe I'm gonna save it, say I don't want it there, say instead I want it on my desktop. All right, great. So I'm gonna